Okay, so today we're going to be discussing certain prepositions that we use in English. Now, prepositions are words that are quite common in our day-to-day English. These are words that you can actually find in one's spoken mother tongue, but really sounds weird if you use in a mother tongue. But in English, these prepositions are highly focused and they're highly known. So we're going to look at basic prepositions that we have. We have many prepositions, though we are only going to look at basic prepositions. So we're going to talk about the prepositions in, on, at, and finally by. Because these are very common in our English. They're very, very common. But now these prepositions are used in different scenarios. So I really want to talk about how these prepositions can be used when it comes, for instance, transportation. Now, we all know what transportation is. We've all been transported before. So transportation will involve a particular object. In this case, we just say a person moving from one position to another, covering a distance. So these prepositions can be used, but not all of them, to be precise. In transportation, we mostly talk about 3 prepositions from the 4 basics. And for a start, we'll begin with the first preposition, which is in. Now, in is very common, but in is used mostly for private ways of traveling. This involves private ways of traveling. So private ways of traveling will involve particular objects. For instance, in can only be used for a car and a taxi. Car and a taxi. Though there are certain exceptions we follow, but for the time being, we're just going to look at a car and a taxi. If you are in a car or a taxi, you understand the preposition will be used in your statement. So you will always be in a car or in a taxi, but a car and a taxi involves private ways of traveling. It doesn't really involve a big multitude. It only involves a small section of people. Mostly, you could just say private for easy understanding. With that said, I want us to move on to the second preposition, which is on. Now, on does not involve the private sector. It involves the public, because on involves a public way of traveling. Because public ways of traveling will not involve a car and a taxi. If you're looking at the public modes of traveling, we can look at things like a bus, train, plane, or even a boat. Which means you can be on a bus, on a train, on a plane, or simply on a boat. Now, with what has been said, there are many exceptions one can follow. Exceptions that states that if you are using the preposition on, let's presume bus, train, plane, or boat, these are public, they're involving a large multitude. For instance, I'll give you many scenarios that happen here in Quito. You'd find that you're paying the same amount of money, just like everybody in the bus. You see, that's what one person could say. It's like everybody in the bus when you should be on the bus. So, like anybody on the bus, you will be paying the same amount of money. You see. So you cannot say that no, bus officer, I'm not seated properly because it's involving the public. It's not your bus. Now, for the reason that it's not your bus, and you can never really say in, because when you say in, you'll be making a mistake. You will just be on a bus. You'll always be on a train, on a plane, and on a boat. But exceptions are that if you owning the bus, the train, plane, or boat, if it's yours, ngayenu, you can use the preposition what? In, by saying I'm in my bus, in my train, in my plane, and in my boat. But be mindful. At the moment, you don't have your own bus, you don't have your own train, plane, or boat. Maybe for some of you. But since you do not own such, you can never really use the preposition in. In can only be used if it's yours. Now, since it's not yours, you use on. But be mindful that if you own one day a bus, you will say, I'm in my bus. Now, there are many exceptions because we're saying on deals with the public and in deals with the private. Exceptions that involve bicycles and skateboards. A bicycle does not really involve the public, it involves a private way of traveling, but you can never really say that I'm in a bicycle. Okay, you will always be on a bicycle because you can never really be in a bicycle. That don't make sense. Okay, with that in our minds, we can quickly move on to the third preposition, which is by. Now, by tells us how you got there. How you got there. Now, how did you get there? Presuming that you are, presuming like, okay, let me give an example of myself. I would ask myself to say, how did I get where I am to produce this video? So I would say I came by bus, by train, by plane, or by boat. Okay, you say I came by the mode of transportation that you inquired. So you say I came by car, by plane, or by water, boat. Okay, because by talks about how you got to a particular water